Okay, so now we are officially started since the recording has begun. Stephen, welcome. How's it going?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. All right, so we have, oh, there's Alvaro. We've just got a couple of agenda items, and I wanted to add one more about timing, or sorry, we're talking about looking at doing this meeting at a later time in a bi-weekly cadence, just to allow other people to come. So I wanted to talk about that, as well as I'll put that on at the end. So we'll just get started with our intro community question. What is the best thing you have eaten recently? And I will start in order of what I see on Zoom. Patrick.
Oh God. What's the best thing I've eaten?
Yeah, recently, something recent.
Recently. Oh yeah, hands down. I was at Day Texas, and afterward, the entire speaker corps went to Jack Black's barbecue, and everything there was amazing. So yeah, we just had. I think the thing that everyone really thought was amazing was the, Texas barbecue. It's brisket, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we had, imagine all of these data nerds, like data scientists, data engineers at a huge picnic table, long table, all eating brisket out of a huge thing.
Amazing.
Love it.
Sounds so good.
So it really was the people more than the food, but yeah.
But still, barbecue is one of my favorite food groups.
Yeah, I'm there.
That's awesome. What about you, Donna?
Oh yeah. So interesting enough, I was in Texas this weekend to visit with family, and I'm native Texan. So Tex-Mex is my thing. So I went to a new place with my sisters called Señor Locos in Plano. And
isn't that where they made meth?
Yeah. No.
Oh no. That was yeah. Never mind. Different thing.
Yeah, but no. But their fajitas and their nachos, amazing.
Oh,
okay.
So delightful.
If you like light, when I say light, I mean light on the sugar margaritas. Those weren't bad either.
That sounds delicious and lovely.
Yes.
What about you, Alvaro?
Okay, first thing I have to say that I lived in Texas, in Austin, for 1 year, attended UT. So I also know a little bit about Texan food. And by the way, I love brisket and barbecue, no question. But I was living next to what is since then my favorite burger place in Austin, which is called Dirty Martin's. And it's dirty, but the food is incredibly delicious. It's juicy patties. I always asked them a triple patty, and they were like, "Really, triple?" I was like, "Yes." This is so
Do it up.
Yeah. Anyway, about myself, it's also barbecue, but slightly different style. Basically, we do at the office barbecues every now and then, and we have an Argentinian chef that brings Argentinian meat that buys here in Spain and prepares all that on the grill, and it's absolutely fantastic. Sorry, we're having another one tomorrow. You're more than welcome. If you're around Madrid, you can still make it. Really, I promise you, if you make it to Madrid, you're invited. That's it. And Spanish wine, so it can't get better. I mean, it can't get better. It's pretty good already, I would say.
Yeah, you're winning so far. Keep going.
Keep going.
That's great. Very cool. How about you, Victor?
Yeah, I haven't eaten a lot recently. So actually the best food is actually what I cook myself.
Yeah, of course.
It's actually, bought some liver, and I know it's a special type. Well, yeah, it takes too long to describe. Yeah, that's what I find is actually best recently.
Amazing. Home cooked meals are fantastic. I am with you there. Stephen, what about you?
Yeah, I guess I don't eat that much meat, but the other day I grilled a steak. It was really good.
I'm sensing a theme with some of what we're talking about today. Yeah. Meat at the center. And Harsh, what has been the best thing you've eaten recently?
I just got done with my exams.
Excellent. Did you celebrate with anything delicious?
No.
Okay. I'll share mine, which is very simple, but I had a strawberry cupcake, and it was gluten-free, dairy-free, and egg-free. So I have a lot of food restrictions, and I don't get to eat stuff like that very often. But we've had some made for my daughter's birthday by one of our neighbors, and it was fabulous. She's a baker, and she does all kinds of fantastic stuff. And I found out she lives just down the road from me, about a couple minutes, which I'm very excited about. I'll be
Wouldn't
getting
that be just like a nut covered strawberry? I mean, I think that's what I think of when it's like all the things you said it isn't. It's like, okay, they just roll a strawberry and nuts, and that's a pretty amazing sounding too.
Pretty much. But the Constitution, there's a lot of sugar involved in there, which made it pretty awesome. Awesome. Well, we will go ahead and dive in. I know that Jonathan couldn't make it today. Patrick, you've been involved in the white paper. Do you want to give an update? Do you want me to share what we have done with Jing so far? It's up to you.
I could pick it up. I mean, I think Jing has been great at poking everybody. This is great. It was like every group project I ever did in college is like this. There's a lot of people involved, and everyone has something to do. We're into the point now where on the white paper, there's a pretty decent outline. The link is in the description for the meeting. And we just need to do it now. That's what we were joking about earlier. Is like, I feel like I just wrote this book, so I'm part of it. So I'm just going to start copying and pasting parts over now that I own the copyright on it. But I think that this is going to be, I don't know what the deadline is. I know we were supposed to talk about it at KubeCon in April.
Right.
Which is going to be
up faster than we think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's nothing like a good deadline. And which is also going to be interesting because, I mean, we've pretty much, I mean, I'm not able to travel at this point, and I think that's going to be where a lot of people are right now. And so how this gets presented there, it was going to be a panel, but regardless, I mean, this is what I think is going to be the challenge, is getting people engaged and not just throwing together a bunch of words and saying we did this. It's going, like any good open source project, you can commit any code you want, but the review is what's important. Does it pass the test?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's when this is really going to turn into something, is when a lot of eyeballs look at it until you're dead wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So probably something that we need to start thinking about now is how many people are going to actually review this once it's done. Because I think that's a cheaper, when you think about the level of effort, the level of effort of creating the words and putting them onto paper is really high. The level of effort of reading it and telling someone they're wrong is really low. So we can find more people to do that. And I know you nerds out there, I know how it is. You're like 30 people tell you're dead wrong. Yeah, but I mean, that's
actually something to follow up on that. Actually, I agree 100%. I'm a database consultant for 20 plus years, so I'm not inexperienced. However, I love to contribute to the DoK effort. So one thing I find is, for example, review, like from a database perspective, review the code and all that. So I have, for example, for the cloud native PQ, PG, sorry. So I try to look at the code. The problem for me is first I need to understand Kubernetes and learn a KubeBuilder, right? So that's something I'm learning right now. So it would be great if we have some sort of for each project have sort of a videos on how the code is organized and how to read the code this way. Because I've been doing programming before, actually done like Fortran and C++, but haven't done Go. So it would be great to have some kind of help, or at least some group kind of learning together. This way, there'll be more people who understand the code, who will be able to review. May not be able to write new modules, but we'll be able to review the code.
Well, right now this is not code. This is a white paper. And sorry, I was using an analogy of code, because that's, I think a lot of us understand that in open source contributions, that's mostly what we do is do PRs. But in this case, it's a white paper on data on Kubernetes, and there's plenty to do in there too. It's similar to code because it's very prescriptive. And so if you take a look at the link that's in the description or in the meeting invite, you'll see an outline, and the outline covers quite a bit. And it's still up. If you want to take a look at that and comment, that's great. It's pretty storage heavy. I think that's something I'm personally trying to angle away from. I could care less about storage. I think storage is kind of irrelevant in the long term, but I think there's a lot of folks that disagree with me on that case. So yeah.
Okay, I saw you mentioned code. Yeah, I agree that white paper also, I already read the white paper, and yeah, love to contribute where possible. Yeah, I was referring to actual code, which I think also, yeah, would be nice to have some
there
sort
is
of
code out there. Actually, Victor, just to be clear, the students, interns in DoK have been working on projects, and they've built out some POC kind of test stuff. And when they first started, it started out as a really kind of focused effort. Now they're trying to be more general. So certainly something that you could participate in. If you go into the DoK Slack and just ask about the How to DoK project, there's code in there.
Okay, I'll check out that. Thank you.
I just looking at that, I did have a comment, and you probably have already talked about this, and I apologize for any duplication, but when I think of data protection, data on Kubernetes, bringing over, right, a stateful application, I think about the data itself and protection of the data, and not just the backup, restore, DR, migration use cases, but also the inspection observability of that data that is sitting on on the storage system itself. I see more like TLS, cert management, encryption, more of your classic way of thinking of security. But have you talked more about, one of what I hear from my customers is the reason why they're hesitant in moving over that stateful application data on Kubernetes is really, it's not just about that day two operations, but it's also, security, right? Securing the data.
Well, so yeah, I appreciate what you're saying there. So yeah, security as a overt thing, like TLS, things like that, for sure. Encryption at rest,
those are classic. But when you think of ransomware, when you think of observing the data and classifying the data, that so customers are moving more toward that, deeper inspection of the data.
Would that fit into, and I actually do think this, I'm leading the witness, but I think that fits into observability.
If you think of observability, not because I come from Tanzu observability, right? So
no, not cloud. No, this is cloud native observability, meaning
so if you,
I don't want to be surprised.
Yeah, if you think of observability as just a metric of performance, right? Then no. But if we think of data observability, it's a definition.
And the reason I say this is because, and this is a mind shift, and maybe I don't want to be preachy, but I think this is an important thing that I've been trying to help people with, is moving from the old school DBA version of observability to the SRE version of observability. Where SREs are, when they think of observability, they're like, how do I make sure the business is running?
Yeah, right.
And,
your classic Datadog, your classic, but and it's
no, not products. I'm talking about people. Like, what do they need to know to keep the business running? Because SREs are responsible for the infrastructure running to keep the business alive. And that includes, is my data secure? Is it there? Will it be there if something bad happens?
Right, the
You know?
resilience of that data.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think security might fit in there.
Not as intuitive as the outline, but if you think it will evolve there, I'm certainly, you know, keen
I guess
to
I'm inviting
help
you.
grow that area.
I'm inviting you to
Yeah,
explore that because I think it's worth talking about.
yeah, I think so too. Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
Also, Patrick, I wanted to mention, I just dropped a comment in the outline itself. I don't have much free time, I have to admit that, like everyone else, I guess. But there's because otherwise I could contribute several areas. But there's one that is specifically of my interest lately, which is the running databases inside versus side Kubernetes. I left a comment there, first of all, because I wrote with the help of DoK actually an article, a blog post at the News Stack, which covers this topic. And I think there could be some information that could be used from there. And I'm planning actually to blog about this topic again in the next few weeks. There was a very interesting discussion on a Twitter space by Kelsey Hightower, and then following up on Hacker News. And I want to take on this and reflect more on the topic. So maybe out of this content that I have already created, or the one that I'll be creating, there could be insights or text or anything that we can use for the white paper. So I'm happy to collaborate with this.
Yes, I think that's the point. Is we shouldn't have to reinvent a lot. I think we've all worked on different things. Like Alvaro, you and I have tons of words out there. I'm sure others have too. We should be refining and moving, not reinventing.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just copied the link there to this article. So feel free to go through it and see if there's anything that we may want to use from there. And I can keep the group posted on the next steps I want to proceed on this one. And then we can, iterate that part too. So I'm happy to collaborate on this
Absolutely
item at least.
Yeah, because I plan on doing a lot of the same. I am not going to sit down and with a blank piece of paper type. I'm going to be copying and pasting. But I mean, there's also things that I think we've learned, over time where, okay, we've come up with this much idea. How much can we get it down to this much now?
Are we looking into build versus buy decisions at all? That's kind of its own thing. I mean, I think like, I don't know, it's kind of a decision that you have to make, I think, before we even get to the point of running data on Kubernetes versus off Kubernetes, of like, if you want to run your data in the first place. And is that something that's kind of outside of the scope of what we're trying to do here, or?
I think so.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: is that like using a data service versus spinning it up in Kubernetes yourself?
Yeah. So let like RDS for Postgres, or whatever cloud provider you're using for whatever database, and kind of offloading that management versus running it yourself, and then making that decision between whether or not you're going to use Kubernetes or something else.
I think this paper is after you've made once you've made the decision to run it yourself, or maybe this is what I think this is probably a better way to put it. As you're making a decision of whether you want someone else to do it or do it yourself, this will help in your decision. Like, okay, if you want to do it yourself, here's the things you need to know. Are you willing to take this on? If not, go use a service somewhere. And that might be something worth putting into the preamble in the introduction, because there's this goals. Like, we're only covering databases in this white paper. That's a key thing, right? And sure, there are a lot of ways to do databases, but I think that it may be worth mentioning in the early part of it. And if you want to put a comment in here, I can, that this is to help you make the decision if you want to run your database by yourself, or those should aid in your decision making. Because I think that if you think about, like, whenever you're making that decision, you want to have all the information. Like, if you're like, oh, I'm going to use Kubernetes to run my database and I have no idea, I'm just going to, that's probably a recipe for disaster if you're not ready for that. Especially if you're one person in a huge team. You will die.
I like the idea of adding that into the preamble somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall, Stephen, that's probably what we would see more. And Melissa, I think this is our DoK survey for this year, is getting into that decision making. Like, how many components in your data on Kubernetes picture are just services that you rent versus, it's the buy versus build. I think that would be a very interesting question.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about the buy versus build thing, way too much probably than I should. But I think it's, especially with the economy and where that's going, I think people are going to start to like reevaluate just how they're running things in general. Whether they want to rely more on services to, reduce management cost, or whether they want to manage more of their own because their service providers are too expensive. I don't know. I mean, I think it's definitely out of the scope of this, but something that I think is interesting and poignant given just what's going on.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I had a conversation yesterday with a Apache Cassandra committer who works at Roblox, and the thing that they have is they only do their own data centers. They do not use the cloud. So every decision they have to make is you're going to do it yourself, which is still a thing, but I think you're right. And they're making that decision for money reasons too. They think they can run their services cheaper than if they did it in the cloud. And at a certain scale, sure. Dropbox does the same thing. But that's why I think this is an interesting question to ask in a survey, is like, not only are you, but what's the motivation? Is it ease, cost? Do I have the skills? Because that's another thing. No one can hire enough nerds right now. Right. I don't care how many layoffs there are.
Right. Yeah, indeed. I think just to reinforce, I mean, in the last survey, we asked, they were, as people were wanting to move more DoK workloads, yes, we are by a large margin. They were going to continue to add DoK workloads. And we asked, how are you going to skill up for that? Are you hiring, reskilling, training? And they basically, the answers were yes, all of the above, and in short order too.
I can definitely, as I interview customers almost on a daily basis, I can tell you the retooling and training is a real thing. There's a real disconnect between your general IT ops, right? That's central IT organizations, and your DBAs and your DevOps teams, and just trying to, depending on the maturity of the company that you're talking with. So it's, yes, we want to bring our workloads to Kubernetes, but they have to factor in a top-down approach, right? So they have to retool from the business point of view, not just technically. I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I know the pain firsthand.
Yeah.
Well, it's a universal problem. It has been since I've been in this industry for 30 years.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Never at any point.
Same, right? Silos and
wow, we just have so many qualified people applying for these jobs. No one has ever said that in my world. It's always been like, oh my God, we have 30 open positions and we can find 5 people, and we have to be competitive. That's always been the case. It's going to change. I mean, I think part of the movement towards data on Kubernetes and Kubernetes in general is to reduce the amount of people needed to do the job that needs to be done. I've said that a few times in blogs. It's like, yeah, we're reducing the number of humans on purpose. And it doesn't mean that anyone's going to be out of a job. Just that means now we can actually do things and not fail. Yeah.
I want to ask a question to everyone here. May I proceed?
Yeah, please.
See, I'm a student, so I'm asking this from a student point of view. That do you think that the more and more we get towards data infrastructure level, I think more and more of us have to shift our learning from administrative tasks in IT operations to more into platform engineering tasks, means developing more of the operations tooling than actually working on how to administer the system in general. Do you think that?
Yes. You're right. If you are learning how to run systems on a command line, you're going to be the next generation of COBOL programmers. Do you understand that that analogy that I just put out?
Maybe yes. I don't know.
Okay, no. Okay, so
COBOL.
He's not as old as we are.
yeah, no, well, COBOL,
I'm
COBOL's
not
still a
as
thing.
old. I'm
Definitely
just
not.
18 right now.
No, I understand. So Harsh, this is what I'm talking about. Is COBOL was a language that was used in mainframes in the 1960s and 70s. Like, this is 50-year-old language, right? 60-year-old, 70-year-old language. The problem is that because infrastructure is the way it is, there are still jobs for people writing COBOL programs. It's not a job you want, but it's out there. And what I'm trying to draw a similarity to is if you're doing command line system administration, you will have a job, but it's probably not the future. And thinking it's going to be less about installing one thing than installing everything for the application. System level thinking. Databases are a part of it, but the database is a crucial part of deploying your entire application in one deployment file. The thing that I would, as a student, and I think this is something that's great to bring up, is we're trying to build infrastructure that conforms to the application and not applications that conform to the infrastructure. And this is the difference.
Thanks.
I also I don't know, I kind of maybe want to dissent slightly. I agree with everything you just said. The future is, the way that we're headed now, but I also feel like having the experience of doing things on the command line and typing out commands and seeing why they fail and understanding kind of how the fundamentals of what you're doing work, it gives you, I think, some debugging skills that are useful when things go wrong. And also you get an appreciation for what we have now. I mean, I don't think it's, it's definitely where we're headed now is, just significantly the capabilities of what we can do now with, tools like Kubernetes and the infrastructure as code and all these things are significant. But, I think having that understanding of where we came from can also help a little bit.
I love this debate, by the way. This is great. Well, Stephen, when I was a C++ programmer, I had my disassembler running always as well, because I needed to know the machine code, because at the time I didn't trust my C++ compiler that I was using. Eventually I started using Java and I gave up all hope for living, but and using Go and things like, now I never disassemble my binaries. I never look at the assembly code. I think we're in that moment now where I write C++, but I don't trust it yet. But eventually I will, and we have to, because we just don't have enough time. So we're the builders of that. We're on the front line of moving this forward. And I think that's exciting, right? Is we do our jobs here, or we put our energies into, like, I love what Alvaro is doing, because he's not okay with the way things are right now. He's like, no, we're going to fix this. Pretty soon, no one's going to look at the assembly code because of what Alvaro is doing. And that's great. But it's probably like we're in the 10-year cycle. So Stephen, you're right, I think. But Harsh has got a whole career ahead of him. Let's work on him. He can't be bitter like us.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I mean, it's an interesting way to think about it, of just building abstractions on top of abstractions to the point where you're comfortable enough with the lower level abstractions, you really don't need to think about them anymore. I mean, from my experience, and you know, I've been in the industry for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. When you're running infrastructure, I guess it's different because and I don't know, maybe you made this argument about C++ and the disassembler, but applications can do anything. And a lot of times they do stuff that just doesn't necessarily jive with what you're trying to do on the infrastructure side. I don't know, it's like kind of derailing a little bit, but I mean, I think it's you know, something interesting to see where it goes and think about.
So bringing it back around for this outline on this data on Kubernetes white paper, I think there should be some idealism built into it, and just a little dreamy. Like, we think this is the way it should be. It doesn't mean that it is. I mean, I work on an operator, and that thing can just fail miserably sometimes, and I get it, but you know, we'll fix it. But we have an ideal, right? There's something out there that would be great if we had level 5 operators for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm still figuring out how to make ChatGPT deploy Kubernetes infrastructure, but I'm working on that.
But by the way, I have a small comment for everybody, and also for you, Harsh. Agreed with everything that's been discussed so far too. I'm a big command line user myself, and still also what Stephen said, it's not a bad thing to also learn these ways. So as Patrick said, the future is going to be something else. It's infrastructure as code, or however you want to call it today. But in reality, learning the internals is never a bad thing. Actually, I wanted to raise a term that probably you're all familiar with, probably even more you, Patrick. This actually came from one person very well known in the Java industry, which is called mechanical sympathy. And mechanical sympathy is just this idea that even you program in a high-level language like Java, where you're quite far away from the CPU, right, and the memory, because of all these abstractions that are in place. By having a deep understanding of what is below, actually makes you a much better programmer. So looks like it's too far, but having this understanding is quite good in reality. So I would never hesitate to learn command line, and I would definitely keep in mind that the future is probably not command line, but more programmability of infrastructure, however you want to call it. Right? Yeah, I'll just post here a link about mechanical sympathy in case anyone is not familiar with it, but it's something worth exploring.
That's great. Thank you, everybody. I think the one of the key questions we had, the open questions, Patrick, for the white paper and outline were we have some people who raise hands to contribute. We need people to review. Awesome. Donna's going to help contribute. Fantastic. We'll continue to put out pings for everybody to help us fill any open gaps. I think most of the sections, it looks like, have not most of them, I guess, a handful of them have a person assigned to them. So we'll ask the community if other people can sign up for some of these. And I'll confirm with Jing what the deadline is too. I think it is at KubeCon. That's what our plan was to release it right around that time frame.
Okay. So on reviews too, do you with the DoK, do you have a method Am I just gonna keep an eye on the document? How is that?
That's a great question. I don't know that there's a workflow yet, but that's a question. So Jing Yang, who is one of the co-chairs of the storage tag, is someone we're collaborating with. She is in our channel. She's part of the DoK community, and she's in the channel. So I'll ask her the questions about deadline and workflow and that type of thing. I think initially she wanted to get all of our feedback in the doc, see who's going to write stuff, and I'll see if she can give us some due dates.
Thank you.
Awesome. Is there anything else in the white paper?
Avoiding the actual thing which needs to be done.
Yeah.
It needs to be done.
Yeah. Right things.
I like the debate though. This is good. I think this is where the review is going to be really helpful. So Stephen, you're on the hook now.
I'm putting
No
your name
problem.
Stephen.
Let's go.
All right. Okay, great. The next update we have on here is Alvaro, the operator feature matrix. Alvaro.
All right, so I have good news, and good news is that I believe that we have already a version of the feature matrix itself that is 100% ready for feedback. So I got some help with from collaborators and people have been asking for feedback. Maybe we may introduce in the future small changes, but pretty much is there yet. Let me actually share the screen. First of all, let me remind you the repo. It's on the meeting notes, but I'm going to put it here in the chat. This already the Data on Kubernetes community official repo. There is it's an open repo, and I really welcome any kind of feedback because this is a community effort. This is a vendor neutral effort, and I would like to hear opinions. Now, let me share the screen. I'll show you a little bit how it looks like. Yes, more of an FYI for you. I'm going to make the font bigger. Can you confirm you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. So right now it's essentially one file. I will craft a little bit of additional metadata, say a README and description about the repo and all that. But for now, I just wanted to provide a brain dump. It's of the whole idea, right? And it's contained within, first of all, there's a top level folder called Postgres so that we can accommodate other database technologies within the same repo. This was one of the main goals by DoK for hosting this. So actually the main top level folder is the technology. And then within the Postgres folder, there's this specification. There might be some readmes in the midway. There's going to be a vendor specification, which is kind of the vendor guide on how to make a submission for your compliance for this matrix. And this is the main file. This is called what I call the source of truth. And all the files will be derived from this. Essentially, the main file that will be derived from this is another YAML file that will be the template for vendors to submit their compliance against the feature itself. So let's look at the file itself. We're talking about a 45 kilobytes file, 44 kilobytes file. Okay, so there's a fair amount of work here. It's almost 1,000 lines, and it contains as of today 101 features. So I would say it's quite detailed. If you look at every feature, they're first of all classified into categories. There is an ID per category and ID per feature, so we can uniquely identify them. So if there's going to be a discussion, you can reference them by category ID and feature ID, and it makes the discussion easier. These IDs are meant to be stable, so even if we change the name, description, etc., that we can keep these IDs. So again, we can referring to them. And essentially, this is a list of these 101 features. Each feature looks like this potentially. It has the ID, has a name, the type, which is either a Boolean. Most of the features are Boolean, and this is by design. So you actually said yes or no. And then, or they could be a string or a string array in this case. And this is what the vendor is expected to submit as an answer if the vendor implements this feature. Actually, if you don't implement the feature, you need to submit this feature on your submission. But if you do, yes, and then you need to provide this value plus some other fields that will be detailed on the vendor's guide. Then there is a description, and optionally an indication for the vendor on how to complete the information about this feature. So it's essentially a way of saying how you need to provide the answer. And then there's also an optional field that is main, which identifies which features might be more important than others and should be highlighted separately. So again, because this is 101 features right now, there will be around 20 or 30 that belong to the main section, which means let's display this first so that someone who wants to have a quicker overview of all the features that are provided by a given operator, you will look into these ones first, and then you can dive deeper into the rest. And this is the pattern across all the features. Again, descriptions, sometimes our descriptions are a little bit longer, sometimes they're a bit shorter. They are meant to use Markdown, so you can include links or lists as part of these fields. And this is also nice because we are expecting later on to produce a visual representation of this matrix. So by applying transformation from these YAML files into some kind of HTML, right? So what this is done, and again, you can go and check the file by yourself, read it, give any opinion. There's a lot of features, as I mentioned in the past, that are not Postgres specific. So I would say for DoK feature purposes, there's three kinds of features here. The features that are very Postgres specific, and that's it. There's features that are Postgres specific, but it's easy to draw a parallel to other technologies. And by doing a simple exercise of translating them to the domain of another technology, let's say a MySQL database or a Cassandra database, they would still make sense. And there is features that are absolutely Postgres independent and could potentially make sure for any, at least a stateful operator running on Kubernetes. So from this, we may derive in the future other equivalent feature matrices for other technologies. Now, what I would like to have right now is just feedback for someone from, and I would appreciate if from DoK we can contact. I will also do efforts on my side to contact other at least Postgres operator vendors to provide feedback on this. I would like to make this process not very long, maybe a couple of weeks, okay, 3 or 4 weeks if someone believes needs more time, and reach a final agreement on this, and then call it 1.0. And because I don't think there's much more to do than discuss about the features, add missing features, update descriptions or polish them if required. Any kind of feedback is of course welcome. If something doesn't belong here, also let us know. And from there, I would like to move this forward. So once we have this, or we can actually start also working on the visual representation on the website and the vendor submission process. We can also provide a sample version so that people can also check how it works. And from there, we can just start creating the website. I think we're getting there. So I just need hands to review feedback, ideas, and start building the websites. What do you think?
I think I'm pasting this URL into my Kubernetes channel on our internal Slack. Telling people get on
Awesome.
it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I mean, probably there's still a little bit of context required right now. That's why I'll try to come up with in a couple of days for a README, so at least people understand what is this and why some things are laid out the way they are. Of course, feel free to also share the presentation, the slides that I produced. They're linked also in the documentation in the shared doc, and also for recording, because more context, likely more context is provided there. But I think it's easy to follow anyway.
Yeah, I think one thing for sure is it needs to be out there, like I mean, beyond the repo, it needs to be in a place, because I'll tell you what will happen is product managers everywhere will start seeing it and not seeing their name on it. That's when you start getting submissions. The PRs will start rolling in fast, because this is exactly how my product team works. Is like they don't care until like there's something public out there that they're not in. And then, something's wrong in the universe.
Hey.
Yeah, you know, Donna, that's true.
Yeah, so that's why I would like to produce the README and the vendor submission guide soon, so that it will be very clear on how to proceed. to produce the submissions. And yeah, just call it 1.0 as soon as we can, so people can start making submissions. And then once we have those submissions, we can still start building the websites. I mean, the website itself, right? Which is the opportunity to list all the submissions and then visualize as a render table each submission. Also, potentially could be also interesting to compare. But my main point is to visualize the submissions. And then we can allow, well, we don't need to allow, but to encourage vendors to also render these submissions on their own documentation website. I believe it's very, very helpful. And these will become the repository of features that will be dynamic, because every vendor will supposedly submit a new version each time they add some new feature, because will be better for them, and users will be always informed of the most up-to-date version of all the features provided by a given operator and version.
A question on the promotional side. Do you want us from DoK to share an update in a blog in its current state, or do you want to wait? Do you want us to wait until the README and vendor submission is ready to do that?
Yeah, let's make this 1.0. Actually,
Okay.
if you see on the metadata field, I call it the beta. Let's see if we need more than one beta. I don't think so. And then let's call it 1.0. Once it is 1.0, at that time, we should also have the website. I don't think it's a big deal. From this YAML, we're going to derive some other files that could be directly used for a website. And enough context, enough README, just not to break and people to rush, or what Patrick was saying. Yeah, I would wait a little bit for that. But I think we can. I'm ready to move fast with this. And if people provide feedback fast, or people say, thumbs up, yeah, go with this, we can get this fast.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, getting it out there is gonna stimulate a lot of activity. I really think that. And the beta is a good choice too. I mean, that way, I think getting it into a final-ish form, it's just gonna stimulate that fear of missing out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, if we start with a blank screen and tell everybody to this will take years. So,
well, yeah, and I think reading YAML is great for some of us, but seeing like something a little more finished is going to be it's more clear at that point. Like, oh,
yeah. And if in 6 months or 1 year we want to create a version 2.0 with significant changes, that's more than fine. But at least we'll get the ball rolling, right?
I think so too.
Cool. Yeah, we'll check back on. I know we started to work on the website backend, but it just kind of depended on what all came out of this repo and how that operated. So we can take a look at that again and start to pull that together.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so feedback to Alvaro, please. We'll be sharing this on DoK channels and talking to different people we know are doing operators. And please, if you know anybody in this group, share that and do the same. Okay, awesome. Well, the last action item on here I wanted to float the idea. We have this as a biweekly meeting. A couple different ideas. One is wanting to make sure we are including people who can't join at this time. Not everybody goes back and watches the video. So one of the things that we've been doing in some of the other communities we work with is a Slack meeting. So essentially hosting the meeting on Slack. We'll facilitate these questions. Everybody can, talk back and forth in Slack, which then has all of the benefit of it being recorded there. And then people can also contribute and ask questions after the fact. So it's not all happening in video conversations only. So I wanted to put that out to the group. 2 things. One, do we want to try that as a way of approaching the meeting, either the next one or future meetings? And 2, do we want to stagger the biweekly meeting times every week? So one is at this time, and then one is later in the day. So the next meeting, for example, would be later in the day so that we can get different time zones involved. What do you think with one or both of those ideas?
I'm flexible. I say I'm flexible. I'm a product manager, not really. I like them both. I like to stagger. I think that's a great idea.
Cool. Any objections? Let me put it that way. Any objections to trying a Slack meeting for our next meeting and trying it at a different time? For example, yeah, I was thinking, Alvaro, for you in particular, because you have an action item, you wouldn't, I'm guessing you won't join if we did it at 4 p.m. Pacific, for example. You couldn't join at that time. So doing it on Slack would enable you to be able to, share some detail. You could even do it before that meeting time, specific time, and then we could collect feedback in that time zone.
Yeah, if you're thinking afternoon Pacific time, I would really appreciate Slack in this case. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think this is what we don't know is how many, and I've done this before with like in these kind of open source meetings where we try to get as many people as, we don't know how many people show up in different time zones.
Right.
Like, so if we do it late PST, which is, more friendly for APAC, how many people are going to show up? I don't know. We just don't know.
We just don't know. Exactly. We thought we'd try it. And if that people do show up in that time, then we'll keep that. If not, then we can just keep the one time and keep it simple. But we wanted to try it and see if we could be inclusive to folks in different time zones.
Yeah, my experience with the Cassandra meetings that we have done the bounce back and forth is I've gotten pretty good response, 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just, because there's a lot of folks in like Japan and India and Singapore and Australia that would love to participate.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like no big objections to it. So we'll send out instructions on how we'll do that next time, and we'll give it a shot and see how it goes.
All right.
Okay, cool. Anything else? Any final questions for the group? All right, I think we're good. Thanks everybody for joining. Great discussion. We'll
Thank you.
again soon.
Thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
see you.
All right, take care.
Goodbye.